Okay, so I'm going to start now. Welcome, everybody. I'm sure there'll still be people entering into the room. If there's pinging sounds, then yeah, it just comes with the territory of anything live. Unfortunately, can't change that much. But today I'm very excited to talk about the AI business architect. I'm going to try not make it too technical. AI doesn't require you to be this vivid programmer that's going to go crazy and have to do all this coding. But there are some components that are going to be pretty important for you to understand as an architect, bringing in AI into an organization and looking at the strategy of the organization. So just some things we'll cover. First, I'll just give an introduction into who I am and what I do. For those who don't know me, I think there's about half of you know me. Key insights from global leaders. So I ran Blueprints for Success. Brianne was one of the guest speakers in that session. And really looking at what are the insights coming out of that and what were the reasons for me running it in the first place. Then looking at the evolution of the business architecture role, critical skills for 2025, and then the new job description explained, and then closing statements, and hopefully we'll have another 15 minutes for Q&A. For those who want to know really technical questions, we might just push that out a little bit more, so there'll be a bit more time available afterwards. Like if you want to really understand the knowledge bases or things like that, we'll just push that out a little bit further. But just so we can get through the content today. Eric, good to see you. Another one on blueprints. All right, just everybody, if you wouldn't mind, turn your sound off because I can hear some echoing. I think, John, that's you. There you go. Thank you. All right, so a bit about me. My name is Deirdre Caren. I am the founder of Agora Insights, and I'm also recently the founder or co-founder of Aiden.ai. So Agora Insights, we have learners, over 10,000 learners studying business analysis and business architecture, and we are nearly at 100 countries. Just short of that, I think we're at 97 as of 2 days ago, which I'm like, if you know anyone in any of the other countries, please invite them. I just want to get to that 100 figure. So I've worked in practical business for it's over 25 years now, but I won't keep going forward. But I worked as an architect and an analyst for those years, working in change projects. I know the pain that comes with the roles. I'm also a very enthusiastic learner. And so business architecture was my next step from business analysis. And with the onset of AI, for me, the beginning of last year, 2023, I thought, man, this is going to change the landscape quite significantly. And that led me to, just moving forward, to the Blueprints for Success series that I had this year. And the motivation for running it and asking people for their feedback and getting ideas on what they're doing was really, I understood that as AI starts coming in, we start focusing on the technical side. But really what I wanted to do is ensure that we understand what people are saying as well. So who are we working with? What are their points of views? What are their ways of thinking about AI, integrating the roles, integrating the technology, and so forth? And so, yeah, I was very pleased to have over 40 interviews. And I'm just highlighting the architects in the room that have contributed to this. So you've got 2 that I can see. The screen's a little bit filled up at the moment, so I can't see if there's any others. You can put your hands up if you want. But Pierre really spoke about architecture and strategy, and a real focus on strategy. Was really good engagement. Welcome. Edgy, for those who haven't heard of that, really looks at critical thinking around architecture and looking at tools. His view on AI is don't be afraid. It's not quite where we should be. Terry Raj looks at the ontology of architecture. That was great. Brianne, your transition. I know you've passed this now, but that was moving out of business analysis into architecture. And then Krishan, really, this was quite, he focused on the future and what the technologies of AI would be in the future, which I really enjoyed.
No,
Eric?
this is Minnesota,
Whoops.
right outside the window of our Mendota Heights School.
Somebody's on, somebody needs to turn their sound off. Thank you. So Eric, all the way from the Netherlands, he spoke about enterprise architecture, but really looking at it differently. A great insight and great quotes as well into AI. By the way, the whole list of quotes will come through. Martin Sharp, he was a naval architect and became a business architect, then became an enterprise architect. So a very interesting journey. And he talks about strategy and really understanding the client, user, etc. experience. Joseph Edward, business architecture, using it to uplift communities. Bill Ulrich, I'm sure most of you know that if you're with the guild, spoke about the call to action for architects. So stop being in startup mode and start getting out of startup mode and doing stuff. There was a lot of discussion around data with Bill. Omar, I'm not sure if you're here, but really great looking at vision, strategy, and particularly with people. Also transition from business analyst to business architect, but really looking at what do we need to understand as working with stakeholders? What do we need to teach other people around AI as well? How do we get those messages across? Esther looked at insights and advice for aspiring business architects, and particularly around how you create value. So what does value look like? Jessica, I really had a fun conversation with Jessica after our conversation. We spoke a lot of geek stuff, and she really looks at information architecture. And for me, there's such a close link between AI, information architecture, and business architecture. I'm not excluding any of the other architectures, so please don't feel left out if I haven't mentioned them directly. So all the other ones are the BA profiles, but I'm just highlighting the architecture profiles. Andreas is actually a data architect, and I can't remember the exact quote, don't let me misquote it, but he said something like, I know more about you than you think. And that is obviously the theme around data. Wendy, of course, talks about holistic architecture, talks about working in communities, talks about how do we have sustainable architecture and so forth. So also great insights. Pierre, he looks at the evolving role of architecture and has a far more practical point of view around architecture, which I quite liked, was looking at how do you do certain things. Tanya Armstrong, so she's the CEO of State 3. She spoke about leadership and governance and the importance of governance with the onset of AI. So really fantastic conversation there. Scott Brooker, I enjoy speaking to Scott about information concepts and how important they are and how they are neglected as the architecture in a lot of cases. So that was really great discussion. Humanizing data strategy. So really great at looking at not just how much data do we have and how important is this data, but really what does this data mean to us? Why are we using it? How can we understand things better? Dora really enjoyed looking at leadership, breaking barriers, and also what was really interesting, and she only said it at the very end, and I could have dived a little bit more into the interview with us, imposter syndrome with the C-suite, and how many of the C-suite have just as much imposter syndrome as the rest of us. So it never goes away, really. And actually, I encourage you to think about AI and think about this problem with imposter syndrome and how you would solve it, because it's more accessible than you think. And then last but not least was Jesper. And Jesper was talking about shifting our thinking from analog thinking to digital thinking. And I'm going to use his theme today to really look at what the role of the business architect would be, or the AI business architect. But that is not diminishing all the wonderful speakers that have helped contribute to this. What I would also like to just add is that there is a link and you can download all of the key quotes about AI from all the speakers. So including Brianne and various other people. So all of the ones I've listed here, there are direct quotes that you can download. You have to sign up to our website. You know how it works. I'm not going to just spread it all over the internet, but there you go. So thank you, Andrea, for sharing that. So this was a fantastic experience. I had a goal to do it. You don't always feel like doing everything, but every single engagement I learned something from. So thank you, everybody. And so hopefully I'll share that with you. So now I'm going to take, as I said, I'm going to focus just on the last interaction with Jesper, but this was a really interesting interview, which I didn't mention. So, wait, sorry, let me just go back 1 second. I've missed, I didn't put that in there. Anyway, so the Hitchhiker's Guide to AI, which is written by Arthur, he's actually a journalist. And he's done a lot of tech journalism. And so he said, don't be afraid. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is the inspiration for this book. But he also did one previously, which was the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Internet. So he's really been on top of the technology. So hopefully you can hear. It's just a minute snippet that I think is relevant. Come on.
We showed less than 10% were using it, but more than a third wanted to use it. Mm-hmm. The following year, when we repeated the research, we asked those questions again, and we discovered that instead of the third or more than a third using it, it had gone up to something like 14%. So still close to 1 in 10, as opposed to now 3 or 4 in 10. And then we asked, why are you not using these technologies? And we gave a number of options. And one of those options was cost, and another one was skills. And we discovered that it was too expensive for most companies to use AI, and the skills didn't exist. And those go hand in hand, because if the skills don't exist, then it becomes very expensive to employ or train people in those skills. In effect, what we found then in 2017 and 2018 was that enterprise was not ready for AI because of the lack of skills. We showed
very interesting interview, and he's done his research. He's very proactive about AI and has said that now, since ChatGPT came on board, the adoption rate is up to 60%, which is quite significantly different. But there are issues which we'll talk about, like data and security and all kinds of other things. There definitely is a need for skills in this area. And for those of you like me, who are in the 90s, where the internet came out and nobody knew what to do, we're in a similar space right now, but it's a great opportunity to learn, and it's a wonderful opportunity to try stuff. Don't be afraid, as Arthur has put it. Okay, so next, let's just have a quick listen to what Jesper has to say, our final interview.
Yeah, I agree.
I have a very simple trick for that in the way that I'm using in business. I'm saying that in the analog world, we have a process and we are trying to digitize the process. We are looking at where the process is not working too well, it's manual here, and we're trying to automate it. The mindset I'm talking about is looking at it from the absolute opposite perspective. It says everything is digital, there are no humans. Mm-hmm. Create 100% digital process, and then step back and say, where do we create more value by putting in a human into this process? So you start digital and you put in the analog, rather than starting analog and putting in the digital.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
So that is a huge mindset change. And this is what I really want to present to the architects today, because it's quite different from my session I had yesterday with the business analysts, which are more boots in the ground, which often are working in projects and really need to understand how to leverage tools. with architecture, it's changing the complete landscape. So I want you to think outside of the box. Raj has a great video on this. He talks about blue ocean and red ocean thinking. And so although I'm going to cover both, really, I just wanted to raise that when you think of AI and we think of business operating models, his approach to say, let's automate the entire thing, but how do we put the humans in the right places rather than trying to rejig it? And the example I gave there was the cart and the horse. A car comes from that Romans created the road to fit the carts and the horse in, and we're still carrying that legacy. Now, some of it you cannot change, right? Because it's too hard to put in, let's say, autonomous vehicles when there's no roads, right? So we have to be considerate about these things. But the reality is, in a digital world, we don't have to worry about the physical barriers that you would have in places like roads and carts and horses and cars and so forth, electric
We
vehicles.
found less than 10%.
Now it works. Okay, so brief view of your job description. There is a full document, but I'm not going to load a whole document onto the presentation. Job summary. It's obviously made up the pretend words here. Ideal candidate will integrate AI with capabilities. So for those who don't know capabilities yet, I've got lots of videos on that. Today is not the day to try explain what that is. Agentic workflows, super important. Understanding the mimicking of the role of what humans and machines would be doing. AI could pick that up. Automation into business architecture. A task to add significant value and drive innovation. The role involves developing and aligning business strategies with organizational goals, identifying opportunities for AI integration, and ensuring AI initiatives comply with governance and ethical standards. All of these are no-brainers. The AI business architect will play a critical role in enhancing our processes, capabilities, services, blah, blah, blah. The core responsibilities, we're going to first look at aligning AI strategy. And there's so many misconceptions around what AI strategy is and it's going to take over the world and all of that. Highly unlikely. The most probable cause is the impact on the environment, the impact on data. And yeah, what we certainly not at Terminator level, but I do want to highlight AI has changed so much just in the almost 2 years now that I've been really investigating and learning about it. It has changed so significantly that I don't think people realize how quickly this is going to turn a corner. So just like when I first started with web design back in the 90s and everyone said, why would anyone need a website? No one ever questions that now. But yeah, this is going to be way faster. They estimate it to be about a 5 to 7 year complete change in organizations. So we're going to look at strategy deployment. We're going to look at AI strategy development and what would that mean for you in that particular thing. Let me just. I always come back to this, and this is going to be your anchor. So when we look at the pyramid, the wisdom pyramid, you start with data. You then look at connecting the parts with information. Architects, we look at information concepts, information architecture, those kind of things. That was the Jessica conversation where we spoke about how do we connect these two. But typically we are knowledge workers. So we have knowledge management, we have knowledge bases, we have knowledge ways of sharing. I'll talk about the knowledge brief as well, in order for us to make decisions within organizations. So where does AI fit into this? Can anyone make a suggestion? Where do you think AI sits? A little pink bubble, yeah. So if you have bad data, your information is going to be bad. It's obvious. If you have good data, your information will be great. Those are obvious statements to be made. And so I think it's going to be really important understanding that your data is a critical part of all of this. And as architects, you need to understand the quality of that data. And most of us have heaps of shadowware, as Bill pointed out in the webinar I had with him. There's so much shadowware, there's so much technical debt, all the stuff that we're dealing with. We can't ignore it. But there's a bright side to this, and this is my personal opinion, and you can tell me what you think. When it comes to business architecture, we can do lots of conceptual modeling. And I think that's really advantageous because AI cannot tell the difference between a conceptual model and a real physical data-based model. It cannot tell the difference, right? It's just a brain. Like, it's not that smart, but it can't tell the difference. So as architects, your goal is to try acquire knowledge for the organization to make good decisions. AI is certainly going to sit in this bucket. This bucket, if it's a mess, guess what? Bad stuff's going to come out. And this is where your human in the loop is going to be so important. So when we spoke about the structure of the human in the loop and how that all works, and Jesper's suggestion are we create an AI-driven environment, business, and we put the human in the right place. Think of that as we go through this. In terms of, sorry, this is all skewed. From an architectural point of view, we look at the knowledge base, which is, I'm sure those who know me will know a little bit more about this. The knowledge base is really where we store our information, catalog, categorize. We have information concepts, we have information architecture. We'd also have to bring in things like meta modeling and those kind of things. Now, as architects, we don't necessarily go into that level of detail, but we certainly need to understand what our knowledge base is, right? And then we have a knowledge brief, which I say often business analysts do. They go in and they investigate. I use the term investigative journalist for a business analyst. They go in and source knowledge and source information and source data, etc. And they do that through interacting with people, through understanding context and situation, etc. But AI can really speed that process up too, and I'm going to show you how. And then we talk about the knowledge graph. Now, I don't know if anyone's heard of this before, but knowledge graphs are a great way to take snippets of information, join the dots, so to speak, pull them together, and then ensure you've got a real understanding of what a knowledge graph would be. And AI is pretty good at creating knowledge graphs. So obviously your knowledge base is going to be your primary factor here if you're using that. For the AI architect, AI business architect, you will need to understand strategy. You will need to understand knowledge-based management, model features and leveraging. These are all new things and everything can be taught. You can learn all of this. None of this is going to be out of anybody's current role remit. Agentic approaches, data management. Now, I'm not going to go into huge data management today because I'm assuming most of you understand this is an issue. Definitely, you will need to understand what vectors and database structures, embeddings, etc. are. Context building, huge with AI. If AI doesn't know the story, doesn't have the use case, it's going to give you junk. Guaranteed. Human in the loop, as I said, validation, verification processes are going to be very important. Ethical AI implementation, understanding things, not just about data, right? Understanding that AI uses a lot of water to run, uses a lot of resources and energy. These are all things to consider within the organization. Prompt engineering is super important. If you can't give the right requirements and the right instruction to AI, you're not going to get the right output. It's that simple. It's like the same principle of bad data in, bad data out. It works exactly the same. Requirements automation. I'm a big proponent of an active BA and a BE arc working together to take what knowledge we have and actually doing something for the business. I don't believe that we should just theoretically talk about capabilities and information concepts. I think we should do something with it. If I was to design a house with an architect, I would expect the architect to actually give me a prototype of what they're expecting. And so I feel quite strongly about requirements as something that we should be incorporating into our architecture more vividly. I know the open group, sorry, not the open group, TOGAF bring that in, although it's not any detail. For all of the analysts in the room will know that there's no level of detail in that. So when you're looking at your strategy, you have to look at several things. You have to understand the capabilities, the infrastructure, the talent, the resources you'll need, the governance, and the tools that you need for an AI strategy. And you need to consider how all of those components work together. Now, sometimes people use capabilities as a competency of a person or organization or team. I'm not using that.
It's delightful to chat with you, and thanks for striving.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm excited too. We'll learn more.
Could somebody mute who's the person that's talking? Sorry. Gotta love live sessions, right? So you can ask questions, no problem. Okay, so the AI business architect is really going to look at those key things. And this is my suggestion. You can change my mind. I'm okay. But after going through this process for some time, that is my recommendation. And again, think of it in two ways. And as I mentioned, Raj has we've got a library for that. You can access the link to that. You have to think of it in two ways. The one is either we're just going to improve our analog thinking by bringing AI in. We had a long discussion yesterday of how bad Copilot is for the very reasons that you're just trying to clip in this another version of Clippy into everything that you're doing. That's not what I suggest at all. So please don't use Copilot as an example of how AI should be implemented within a business. I'm not saying don't implement it. I'm just saying my view is that how could you be worse? And then, but the other version is, what are we going to change and let AI run, and how do we get the humans in the right place? And for me, think of it as a Tesla factory, where basically everything's automated and it is run, but there's specialist humans that are working in those spaces. So it's not humans doing lame and boring tasks. It's actually AI doing those tasks, or robotics doing those tasks, because there's multiple types of AI, by the way, although we're talking about generative AI mostly, but there's also other kinds of AI. Next, I'm going to go in, I'm just looking at the time. Next, I'm just going to look at knowledge management. This is going to be so important. And as I said, I'm not going to go into massive detail about this, but we can leave some space towards the end. Understanding storage, data, information concepts, vectors, and structures is super important. By the way, I generated this off Aiden. I am the co-founder, as I said, of Aiden. So you can now do diagramming and architecture directly in AI. There's not limited, and depending on the type of tools that you're using. So those are all options to use. But without good data and good knowledge management techniques, AI is not going to survive in organizations. This is where your role has a wonderful opportunity that's been presented to you, not just today, it's been here for a while, but I'm making it very explicit that this is a wonderful opportunity for you. Okay, knowledge brief. Now, a knowledge brief is, how do we get knowledge from one particular part into our business, right? So if we're going to do requirements, how do we take this knowledge base and get information that we can use? So I use something, when I always talk about business analysts, I use the knowledge brief, which looks at the background, the problem statement, critical success factors, root cause analysis, stakeholders, current state, future state, business requirements, cost to benefit. And you can imagine how long this takes a BA to do. It's not a simple process. And I'm going to show you what it would look like if you automated this using AI. And so obviously I'm using the Aiden platform for obvious reasons, right? But let me just give you an example. So you give a case study, you add your knowledge base into it, and structuring that knowledge base is going to be really important. And now I want to actually generate an output. I want to get information back. So it's not asking me questions. Now, I'm just going to pause this for 1 second. This is what we would call chain of thought reasoning. All of this that I'm showing you was created through agentic approach, prompt engineering, and markdown. And like I said, I'm not a coder, but here you go. So we've now asked AI to ask us questions, right? To ask the human for questions. That's what chain of thought reasoning means. And then it writes something, and then I'm going to approve this, right? So this whole process of looking at information, a data set, an interview with a stakeholder. So this takes actually 7 minutes. I've obviously sped it up. It can now give you a chart, can show you some of the background into this particular document that you're looking at, the problem statement, the critical success factors. It can also tell you about the root cause, why business analysts, for instance, don't have access to AI tools, the business requirements, any types of requirements, depends on what you're programming. So you can look at the multiple user stories, or you can do functional or non-functional requirements, doesn't matter. Then it can look at a gap analysis. This is what I would call the agentic approach. Now, you can't do all of this in ChatGPT, to be fair. You have to use something that's been architected to allow you to do all of this stuff. Even simple things like having Moscow to prioritize what would the needs be in your use case. And I use this as a prototype, right? You work with the stakeholder, you get the information that you want, you load up the structured data in a specific way, you store the knowledge base somewhere, and now you've got something to work with. And this is where I'm saying what we'd have to do is we'd have to validate and verify this data far more effectively than we have in the past, because it's giving us the information that we need. And then it's our job not to try find the data, but to rather just go directly and say, what knowledge do we actually need to have? Because AI doesn't always get it right, I can tell you that much. But man, the 7 minutes is worth it. It's really worth it. Sorry, I skipped that a bit. So as I said, it can diagram immediately, and it can look at your cost of benefits, Moscow. I never know how to pronounce that, by the way. So it is what it is, if I'm saying it wrong. Okay, so essentially something as simple as a knowledge brief, a piece of information that you can draw out super fast. You can do that by using AI. And like I said, this isn't Copilot that's going to tell you how to spell something. This is generative AI. It's going to generate information for you. But when we looked at the triangle that I was discussing, you still need to make sure that your data is right, and you still need to make sure that you're verifying and validating that information. The next big topic, and remember, you can ask questions in the chat, I'll get back to that. The next big topic is around models. And this is why we also looked at integrating all of these models into one platform of Aiden. People understand ChatGPT, they understand maybe Claude, Anthropic. These are all separate models, right? They do not integrate into your systems directly unless you are calling an API key into your systems. But they have pros and cons. Like Claude is pretty smart, but it's quite expensive. Perplexity is great if you're searching the internet and you actually want real data and real information. OpenRouter, we use that a lot, actually. OpenRouter is, it's got like 200 different models in it, but then you can customize models. So what I just showed you now is a custom model. So we have Anne, who's the business analyst, creating the knowledge brief, and that is what that model does. And that is a custom model that's been created to call large language models to do different things. So it's important when you talk about the strategy that you're doing in your organization that you fully understand not only the models you're using, but how you're going to interact those models where required. And for what purpose do you want to have those models? And they talk about large language models. I would almost say as an architect, don't worry about that. These guys improve their stuff all the time. Next week, there's going to be another thing, right? Keep on top of it, but don't worry about it. But rather be neutral to the models that you're using. You never know which one's going to fall over and which one's going to stay around. Yeah, you have no idea, right? I assume that these guys will stay around, but it could be different. You do also have XAI that's really made a huge effort in the last year, really. So there's a lot. So architects, think of your models that you'll be using with AI. And think of the systems. Are you using Azure, AWS? What type of systems do you have in mind? We talk about agentic. I'm not taking credit for this diagram, by the way. I've just changed the colors because it's quite gray before. But the agentic approach is you have to think of AI as a, I'm going to use the term a person, right? A role. And so this particular role, I use the example of Anne. Anne is creating the knowledge brief. Anne is a business analyst. So the agentic approach is training Anne to do specific things in a specific way. And so what has been happening with large language models, you can now assign things like tools. It can also plan. So it can go step by step, which is what we call chain of thought reasoning. It can self-criticize, and it's actually quite good when it goes back and reviews its own work. Yeah, it's almost like, it really is like training an intern or somebody who's just started in a role. But it can do all the grunt work, like the hard work, like for you to find that information about, let's say, through the knowledge brief and get all the diagrams and everything. That's going to take you ages to do. So you have this agent that's going to be doing it. It has short-term memory, so that's the processing that you're doing at that particular time, the chat that you're having. There's usually, I don't know, I could be wrong. Alan's in the room, so he's a chief architect at Aiden. But this is, it could be like an hour, I don't know if it's a day, whatever, but it's short-term memory. Longer-term memory is when you train it in a specific way and you add knowledge bases to it, and then it becomes more predictable. So understanding that you can get multiple agents working together and doing things, and you can get tools when they go in and they go send an email for you and do various things. So again, that's something we've built into our framework completely. But it depends on what the business wants. Now, I don't think businesses are ready to completely automate unless you're a startup. Perfect time. You don't have any shadowware or old data or anything like that, but I don't think they're quite there. But you need to know about that. Prompt engineering, as I said, you absolutely need to know how to give instructions on the information that you want to retrieve. AI is very confident, right? Here's their answer. And many times it's incorrect, but there's equally a problem between the user and the output that you're getting from the AI. So the AI is overly confident. So you actually need to train it not to be confident and skeptical and not to use words like moreover and that kind of thing. But you also need to understand that the way that you pose the question to AI is largely going to result in the output that you get. Learning prompt engineering is going to be absolutely critical in your role. It is, because you're not having to learn how to program, but you're having to learn how to interact with AI. I think it's actually underestimated on how important this is. I've seen people do really bad prompts and go, AI is so stupid. And I'm going, I see. As I said, all of this came out of prompting. Obviously, there's lots of things, but visualization for architects is really important. AI can do visualizations for you. You don't need to have fancy tools, but having a good data tool, an enterprise tool, will be super helpful to allow for the visualization, storage of visualizations, and using them over and over again. But we all know when working with stakeholders that they ask us for pictures, right? It's a no-brainer every single time. They want to see what it looks like. And so AI can absolutely do that for you reasonably fast, very fast, but it depends on how you prompted it and how you structured it. Next, running out of time real quick, requirements creation. Use it to create content. So if people say we're doing this project, use it to do that project. Make sure that you have access to that project and so forth. So AI can help you do requirements. And for the business analysts, this was a quote I gave to them, it would be essential to focus more on the validation and the verification. Now, how, again, architects can be a keen supporter of this. And again, it's my personal point of view. Whatever your beliefs are, that's you're welcome to it. But my personal point of view is, with our knowledge base that we have as architects, we can absolutely create the user stories to match all of those parts that we have as a knowledge base. Okay, that's me. So that's a simple summary of the architect. There's a more detailed download that you can download for free from our website. The link is on the messages there. I do encourage you to look at the knowledge brief. I've brought in AI prompts with that. You don't have to do anything fancy. And the Business Architecture Fundamentals course, which includes ChatGPT prompts, but they're not the smart prompts that we have in Aiden, are generally pretty good indicator of what we do. It is a Guild accredited course, and this will give you recertification points. So for those who have to recertify every year, you can go for that. A pretty simple way to get into the AI space. But Architecting AI for Business, I do have a course starting in February next year. Catherine has been on it. I always feel sorry for those who are in my first version. I'm sorry, Catherine, you can join the second version too. So she's been super patient about it. We also are offering you to be able to use Aiden with it for a year. As part of that sign up, you can test out all of the theories and everything I've discussed and have the tool available to do everything that we've discussed in today's session. So hopefully that motivates everybody. Now is a great time. I've been very passionate about this. For those who know, thank you for my guest speakers who've been helping me understand the problem a little bit better and the whole process. Any questions? Now's a great time to ask. Anything on AI? Not anything else. Let's keep it to that. The AI business architect. Eric, go for it. And thanks for your presentation. One of my guest speakers.
It's been my absolute pleasure to join you on the webinar sessions. Yeah, and regarding what Jesper mentioned, you showed a short audio clip, in which he suggested looking at the whole AI implementation from a digital perspective and then put the humans in place. Yeah. I was wondering, when I look at this scenario back in the Netherlands, where I'm from, I think it will be very scary for most people in organizations to accept the idea that this is happening, because all these people have many years of experience within the organization, and then have the organization change their business model to digital first and add humans later, kind of that idea. I think it's very scary. Did Jesper, I missed the webinar, so I'm sorry for that. But did Jesper had some perspective on that as well?
Yes. So we did. That's a great question. Thanks, Eric. This whole thing is going to be scary. And the reality is businesses work slowly. Okay. So there is a process that they'll go through. But the reality as well is that this is already here. It's going to happen. So prepare yourself early. Now, our conversation was that you have to be a knowledge worker. So let's just talk about business architects. You've got a fantastic role opportunity here. I'm not saying other roles won't lose their jobs. I don't know. I'm just focusing on the architects. And in our discussion, we said, just like you would in a Tesla factory, where you need the knowledge specialists to interact on those points to check that, have the checks and balances, the ethics, the knowledge that's been shared, etc. I think for architects, the future looks bright. But I am an optimist, so that's just how I am. But I don't think we need to be in a position where we think that maybe it just won't happen. It will happen. There will be an impact and things, but I can imagine as business owners, I own a very small business, but as a business owner, I'd want to be efficient. Absolutely would want to be efficient. Brianne, you next. Another speaker. Great
Thank
speaker.
you so much. Yeah,
Yeah.
I am interested in your AI course for business architecture. I just wanted to know a little bit more information on what level is it at. I think I looked at it a while ago and I wasn't sure if it was like teaching business architecture, or is it more for those that know business architecture but want to start using AI within the practice?
It's the latter.
Oh,
So
good.
it's not teaching architecture at all, but we do talk about architecting AI. So it's purely an AI course, but I do bring in things like the knowledge base, the knowledge brief, and the knowledge graph, because those are okay. Gotta love live. So thanks, Brianne. But yes, it is purely transitioning now into the AI space. So we do look at the roles and we look at those three components of the roles, but it's not limited. We've had project managers on the course. It's not limited to them directly. Okay, thanks, John. It is your mic. John, did you want to speak? Trying to see who's got hands up. No, okay. So I don't know if there are any more questions. We've got another 9 minutes here. Any questions around knowledge bases? Actually, Alan, I don't know if you want to maybe give a little bit more detail around what we've done with the data and security and all of that. I'm just saying he's a better person to ask. If you feel like it, do you want to pop in and just give some insight into the information, the knowledge bases and stuff like that? You're still on mute though.
Was it
Oh, there you
addressed to
go.
me?
Yes, to you. If you could, maybe just provide a little bit more insight. As I said, he's a chief architect at Aiden. I'm just going to quickly go to that area where we speak about, sorry, our knowledge base. If you can just explain a little bit around the data and the vectors and the storing. Alan also is the director at Iris Business Architecture, so he can give you a lot more information. Go for it,
Yeah, so
Alan.
you wanted in terms of privacy or in terms of storage or?
I think let's talk about, talk about both if you can, if you have time.
Yeah, so I think there was some discussion that happened on the previous call regarding data privacy and so on and so forth with AI. And I think it was important to, when we're dealing with large language models like OpenAI or Grok or the ones that were mentioned earlier, to realize that all of them pretty much operate the same way. Is if you use them through their chat mechanism, everything you put in there is subject to be used for training and basically leak out at the same time if you have things that are confidential. So you have to be very careful. On the other hand, when you use the same tools via their API that they provide, so basically an application using those tools, then they all offer guarantees that they will keep they don't keep your data at all, and basically they will never train on your data at the same time. So it's the same provider, but it's a very different way of looking at it. So that's a bit on the data privacy side, looking with OpenAI, because obviously in your business architecture, you will often have a number of things that are might be confidential. You have different strategies and projects that are going around, and that's very often what you want to optimize, and where you want to use AI to start to dig, let's say, in the different relationship around your capability model and see what is impacted and how those things are going and so on and so forth. A big part of where things are heading is really to provide a way to iterate through the different outputs of that AI produces and allow you to polish those and clean those up as you go along. Deirdre was talking about you have to review that information, but also to provide the support to do those type of things and use that knowledge management to do that. So a big part of some of the issue that you will face with AI quite often is that you cannot submit your full architecture as part of a request. It's way too big, okay? And ultimately, it's fine. You go on the chat, and most of you probably have gone on the chat and you ask questions, and you can even include a few pages of information and ask for summaries or other analysis on that document. But when you get to working with not only documents, but structured data, things get very different. And also any business that needs AI has way too much information to basically submit that with every request. So ultimately, you have to apply different techniques to get the subset of data that is the most interesting to AI and let it work with that. And basically, and that's part of the things that we do is we offer AI tools and we describe what those tools can do. But basically those tools allow AI to decide that it wants to often query more data, and it knows how to do it because you told them, here's the tools that we have. And with this tool, you can, let's say, get different capabilities. With this tool, you can get information about different projects, and you can do it this way and that way, kind of how you can query it. And that allows AI, once it gets to the point where it needs that information, to realize that a tool is available to do, call that tool, essentially does a query with that tool of some data, a subset of the data that's relevant is sent back to AI, and then it can use that. So once you start to do that, it gets very much again into that agentic approach, in the sense that there's many steps to the process. And so as we see here, the different tools on the left-hand side are called by AI, and a part of the agent, AI will come back with some answers, and those are reanalyzed, and it goes back with AI, and sometimes it just forks out to AI with 10 different questions, gets back those answers, and starts to reassemble that information. But ultimately, in order to have a real relevant way of updating your data and working with AI with a full view of your enterprise, it is those approach of querying. And when we're dealing only with documents, that's when you hear about vector databases, which is a way to find things that have similar meaning or similar content, again, depending on which type of vector database that you use. But again, the ways of getting the information that is the most relevant to continue the prompting and continue for AI to build its response, its ultimate response. So.
Awesome. Thanks, Alan. I'm going to go over to you, Michael. I'll just do a quick summary. So just for those who might feel a little bit overwhelmed, basically AI needs a tool to call a database. It's more complicated, as Alan gave us a great example, but AI needs to be able to have that API key and the tool, but you need a robust database to start off with if you're going to be doing any of that, because AI cannot handle too much data at this particular stage. I'm sure that will change in the future. Not sure that I've even summarized it as well as Alan, but it's the simple view. Michael, questions?
Are you pointing to me, Deirdre?
Oh, you had your hand up. Did you have a question?
Yeah, there's another Michael. There's more than one here. So.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for this presentation. It was very educational for me. My goal, my key kind of takeaway from this presentation was really to understand what's the current thinking in the business architecture community around AI, right? Because everybody's talking about it. And I'm a certified business architect, and I practiced it at a high level for a couple of years. It's not I guess I'm one of those architects that has evolved the last 5 years into more of what you're talking about here in your framework. So if I look at all the things that you detail out that in the job description for AI business architect, I agree with all of it. My question, and this is not just for you, but for really the rest of the architects in this conversation, is I feel like if you follow the job description to a T, it really describes like my role as it evolved the last 3 years, really focused on generative AI. Though my formal title is Principal Enterprise Architect, I'm one of the few architects in my practice at Boston Scientific that can actually architect enterprise level AI solution, no matter whether it's a simple kind of RAG-based solution or a full-blown multi-agent, multi-LLM type of solution that's popular these days, right? I've had to draw upon not only my business architecture skills, but my EA skills, my business analysis skills, my solution architect skills, my product management skills. And it's taken me most of my career to have this level of knowledge to perform this type of work. And I feel like the description, you've grown beyond what any business architect that I know of can really handle, or even an enterprise architect, I would argue. You have to be at a certain level in your experience and your skill set to do all the things that you've detailed out. So it's like a security architect, like a real architect that specializes in enterprise level security. The domain now has gotten so specialized and skill set specific that you need a specialist, a true security architect to perform the role at a high level, at least, right? I know some things about security through experience, but I could never architect an enterprise level security model or even strategy. There's just too much specialty knowledge involved. And so I feel like the trend that's predicting now with AI is you have to have a lot of knowledge and skill to do it at a high level. And so I think you do a good job of describing it in your job description, but in no way would I say to my like business architecture peers to say, here's how your role is evolving, because most of them, they'll be like, I'm not interested in learning prompt engineering. I'm not interested in doing that. I just want to do business architecture and focus on the strategic alignment. And they get paid to do that. Does that make sense?
It does. I think there's two sides that I look at. The one is, yes, you're going to have people who go, and that's not part of my job, blah, blah, blah. I want to stick to what I'm doing. As Eric mentioned, they're going to be like, well, why do we even need to know about this? But the reality is it depends on where the organization's going. And so we only have roles because they need it. And if that role doesn't embrace the AI componentry that's going to be required for the business, I feel like for a lot of them, it will be short-sighted. Your second part, which was around the security and the detail, I would keep it separate, because you absolutely need cybersecurity, security components, making sure that data is safe. That's going to be an absolute role. It's going to become even more important. It's definitely out of my remit, my personal remit. But the problem that business architects and enterprise architects, I'm just using architects in general here, they are working with businesses who are transitioning, that are working in a very dynamic environment where you have to understand the different roles, the different people. I didn't even get into how much more stakeholder engagement you're going to need with AI in the mix. But so an architect will have to truly understand what those things are. And if I relate it to a building architect versus, let's say, your engineers that are doing these massive structures, you still need somebody to be able to demonstrate the vision of what this is going to look like, be able to work with stakeholders, be able to work with different people. So I wouldn't see it as going into that security level. I wouldn't see the role at that point, but I acknowledge that role of the security architect is going to be exceptionally important and needs to go into that role. But we still need somebody that's going to be able to do strategy to execution between the business. And I think that's needed. Yeah. So anyway, that's my point of view. All right. So any other questions? Otherwise, we'll call it a day. Thanks, Eric, for staying up at night, keeping it real. Yeah. Thanks, Brian and John.
Thank you
and
very
everybody.
much.
Yeah, you're most welcome. I don't know who said that, but you're most
Yeah,
welcome.
John said that.
Oh, John. Okay.
No
There you
worries.
go, John.
Thank
Okay,
you.
good. All right. Thanks, everybody. Please go and look at the links. There's a full job description. Feel free, especially Michael, to give us some really constructive critique on what we've written there, and look at the options and download the resources we've got there. We've got an AI library. Again, that's completely free that you can have a look at. And I've also got all the speakers that I've highlighted some keynotes that they've made. There may be errors, but more or less, I think it should cover. So Eric, you can go see what I said about you. See if you like it or not. All righty. Thanks, everybody. It was wonderful seeing you all. And thanks for the time. I appreciate it.